Welcome to my first balancing the books that I have ever done on my channel. I am going to be doing my wrap-ups a little bit differently in the year 2021 than I did in the year 2020. So in 2020, all I really did was I just took you through everything I read and kind of summarized it and talked about it, and it was one collective place to hear all of my thoughts and ideas. My thoughts and ideas and like really in-depth analysis of the books I'm reading will be done in my reading vlogs. I will tell you here what I've read, some really quick thoughts, and what I rated it, but I'm not going to be going in depth with those reviews here, so you can check out my vlogs if you want to be looking for something specific. I try to put the name of the book into the title so you can just go to those videos and see what I had to say. This video is more about seeing if I bought the correct amount of books for the TBR bingo game that I play every single month to see what books I can buy. So for the game, I have this board back here that you can't see right now, and I fill it out at the beginning of the month. As I read, I can remove cards. When I get a bingo, I'm allowed to buy one book. This is now trying to see whether or not I bought too many books, or I bought the right amount of books, or if I have any books that are any points that can move on to the next month. These are all of the books that arrived in my mail into the month of January. A few of these I ordered before the month actually started, but I'm going to be going over them with you anyways. And this pile is all of the physical books that I read, minus one from this, or plus one from this pile. Let's get started first with all of the books I read, and I will talk about them really briefly, and then we'll get into this nice pile. The only really quick thing I need to say is I waited as long as I possibly could to film this video, but 3 books I bought in January that went towards bingo have not arrived yet, but we're just going to be counting them here, and I will let you know when they arrive. First things first, before I even did my TBR bingo, while I was still on vacation at the beginning of the month, I read The Magician's Nephew, which is the first, if you ask me, some people it's like the 6th book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. It is following this boy named Diggory and this girl named Polly as they go into the land of Narnia for the first time. They actually are there at its creation, and it leads into all of the other stories that we know and love in the rest of the Chronicles of Narnia series. So this is a reread for me. I reread the Chronicles of Narnia every single year. This year I didn't get through the ones that I wanted to because I don't read every single book every single year. I only read the ones I want to read every single year. So I read this one, and there's a few more I hope to get to, maybe February, March, April, but I haven't done it yet. So it's a reread. I love it. I love it so much. 5 stars. The next book that I picked up, and this was for the prompt BIPOC author on my board, was Dread Nation. I read 1 chapter and I didn't really get into it, so I decided to just put it down for now, and then I picked up a different book to replace that one, and that is Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything. So this is an author that I had never heard of before. I picked up her book because she matched the category BIPOC author, and I freaking loved this book. It became a new favorite, like an instant favorite. I don't hear many people talking about it. It doesn't have like the most spectacular reviews online, and I totally understand why. The book takes some weird twists and turns because it is a YA fantasy magical realism contemporary book, but it has these like extreme sci-fi elements. And if you go on Goodreads, this isn't a spoiler, it talks about first contact, aliens, space travel, and it was like perfect for me. So I highly recommend it. It most likely will be in my favorites of the year video, which is crazy because it was the 2nd book I read. I rated that one 5 stars, of course, and I got to remove the card for it. The next book that I read was for the prompt Friend Recommends, and for this I read The Hazelwood, which was super bizarre for me. I really wasn't sure how I felt about it through most of the story. So in this book, we are following this girl whose mother was raised on fairy tales, and then she has been raised to stay away from her grandmother because her grandmother had something odd, and then her mother goes missing, and she and this boy who's obsessed with her grandmother's tales go on this adventure to try to track her down and find her where they think she's going to be at this place called the Hazel Woods. And throughout the story, there are these little interludes of the actual fairy tales that the grandmother wrote and told to her daughter, and we eventually get to see more and more about those, and it was really interesting. I didn't necessarily love the parts where we were in the real world, but I absolutely loved the fairy tales beyond belief. So I ended up rating this book 4 stars, and I could remove a card for that. After that, I picked up Cemetery Boys, which was for my book club pick, so book clubs automatically get put onto the board, and we read this all together. I ended up listening to the audiobook. Oh, I can show you this one. I ended up listening to the audio, but I did have the physical book to help me read through it while I was reading so that it would be easier to discuss with my book club. I took the dust jacket off because the hardback without the dust jacket is way prettier than with the dust jacket, and my dust jacket is just sitting over there and I kind of don't know what to do with it. So in this book, we are following a trans boy who is a bruja, which in the city of Los Angeles is where they're at, means that he can speak with the dead, see the dead, communicate with them. On Dia de los Muertos, their dead descendants come back and can speak to them. And he is trans. I don't know if I mentioned that, but some members of his family accept him, some members don't. So it is kind of about that, but also about this one day he comes in contact with this ghost named Julian, which is a boy who used to go to his school, and he's kind of questioning, kind of stuck with Julian, trying to figure out why Julian is stuck as a ghost, and the two of them strike up an unlikely friendship that eventually leads to a romance. So I didn't absolutely love this as much as I was expecting to. It has like really great reviews online, but I found that it was really mostly character based and kind of the plot didn't matter, the stakes didn't matter in the book at all. And while I really liked those characters a lot, I just didn't have a connection to the book like I wanted to, and I felt like the writing was even kind of young for a YA. Like, I think giving this book to middle schoolers would have been fine. I haven't been around a middle schooler in a long time, so I mean, take my opinion with a grain of salt, but yeah, it wasn't a bad book by any means, and I'm excited to read other books by Aiden Thomas, but this just wasn't my absolute favorite. So I rated it 3 stars, and I got to take that card off the shelf. Next, I picked up The Court of Miracles, which was a buddy read, and that is the prompt that it fulfilled, and I read this with a dear friend of mine. So this is a Les Mis retelling, so we're kind of following Eponine and Cosette, but they have different names in this book, and as their relationship grows. So Eponine is part of the thieving guild. There are these different guilds, I think there's like 8 or 9 of them in this land, and her sister, not Cosette, her sister gets sold to the like prostitute gang, and she devises up this plot, this like con to help get her sister free, and part of that is trying to sell Cosette. And it's definitely YA. It was really interesting. I think the author did a good job retelling the original Les Mis story, which I am obsessed with and love and just really, really enjoy. I think she did a fantastic job. I've read other Les Mis retellings where I don't think they've done as good of a job, but this one I was really into and I felt like was fresh and interesting. The book definitely lost me at some points. It got kind of slow in some areas. There were some weird time jumps that I felt like weren't necessary to the story, and kind of the time jumps were there to help you believe that the characters were closer together because they'd been together for years, but since I didn't get to see them being close together for those years, I like wasn't super believing it. But overall, I really enjoyed it, so I rated it 4 stars. Next, I read for the title does not contain a G, and for this I read The House in the Cerulean Sea, which also might be a favorite of the year. I really freaking enjoyed it. I didn't like get as quickly into this book as I prefer to get into books. This one we are following a man who is supposed to go to these orphanages where magical children are being raised, and he's supposed to just make sure that the orphanages are taking care of them properly. And he gets sent to this like classified one, and when he gets there, the children are supposed to be like this extreme dangerous group of children who they're trying to figure out maybe can they be trusted with humans or not. And of course, he kind of grows attached to the kids and stuff happens. I really, really, really loved this one. I rated it 5 stars if you haven't already guessed. I think that the romance was done super well. It's super slow burn, first off. You really don't get a ton of payoff at the end, but that's kind of how I like my romance, so I was there for it. Also, it is a gay relationship between 2 adult men, so I think they're like in their 40s, so much older. The book does read kind of as a YA, but the themes are universal and the characters that we're following are a lot older. Like the children are children, but the main character we're following is an adult, like I said, in his 30s or 40s. Linus goes there and he does the things that he needs to do. It really reminded me a lot of Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, just in the writing and the humor and how the plot like progressed. It was really good. It had all these great themes of inclusion, and it just really was a great story. I wish that as a previous caretaker, I could have read it when I had been taking care of teens, because it had so many great points and so many good ways of expressing things to teenagers. Like Linus had to say things to children and teenagers about acceptance that I just wish I would have had the language at the time. So 5 stars, I freaking loved it. Check another one off of the board. Next, I read for new author, and I started Range of Ghosts, but I quickly DNF'd it, so I'm not going to be getting into it. It just wasn't for me. It had it's like a saga story where you're following, in a 300-page book, you're following years and years over multiple different characters, and I'm just not a fan of that. And then I picked up House of Salt and Sorrow, which was one of the books I am most excited about to read this year. I originally DNF'd it around the 30% mark, just couldn't get into it, but then I picked it up again and I finished it, and I rated it 2 stars and wished that I hadn't finished it. So in this book, we are following this main girl. I believe the story is based off of the 12 Dancing Princesses or some story like that. I'm not familiar with the original tale in any means, so I don't know how well it did a retelling with this, but we are following this girl. She is one of 12 daughters, and some of them have died off, and she's like second next in line to inherit this island that her father lives on, and they're trying to figure out why the girls keep dying off, because the mom died and then like 4 of the daughters died. I was told that it was supposed to be like really gothic, really creepy, like horror, fantasy, YA, all this blended together. I didn't feel creeped out. I didn't get any scary vibes. The romance was super insta-lovey, like way worse than most books I've read. I was kind of shocked that this book had been written in 2019 because it felt like the main character was just not a well-written female, and I just didn't like it, and I felt like the plot was predictable, and I felt like the story didn't do anything special or fun, and I really didn't like our main protagonist. So 2 stars, but I got to take another one off of the board. Next, I read repeat author, and for this, I picked up Summer of Salt by Katrina Lena. So I have read You Must Not Miss, I have read Horrid, and I have read The Half-Life of Molly Pierce. So this was the next one for me to pick up by her, and I really like her books. They are YA contemporary with strong magical realism. So in this book, we are following these 2 twin sisters who live on this island, and they have magic. All of the women in this line have magic, and it's kind of something that's accepted by the island but not really talked about. And there's this bird that comes to the island every single year, lays eggs, and it brings in a lot of tourists, which help pay for the entire island to continue surviving because it's very small. And this year the bird is late, and the main girl develops a relationship with another female that comes to the island, and it was just like a really sweet story that turned kind of dark near the end, and not dark in like grim dark, but dark in like how reality can turn dark as you age and as you grow, and how things don't always appear as they are, and how some people appear to be good people and then treat you horribly. I will say there is definitely some trigger warnings, content warnings for rape, abuse, stuff like that. I can't think of which other ones I want to say for that, but definitely rape. You need to be careful because the book goes into depth about that. In fact, the book, in the acknowledgements, she talks about some issues that women especially face in this world, and it was really impactful. I think that like the first 80% of the book was like a 3-star, but by the end, the ending just really did it for me. 4 stars. I like Katrina Lena's writing. It's easy to read. It's easy to get through. It's comfortable to me at this point now that I've read a few of her books, and she has like lighthearted characters and plot followed by like deep, important topics that we need to talk about. So I ended up rating it 4 stars, and I think it totally deserves it, and I can't wait to put this on the shelf next to my slowly growing collection. Next, I had to read for Doesn't Contain an S, and for this I read The Girl in the Well, The Girl from the Well by Rin Chupeco, which she wrote The Bone Witch, which I DNF'd, but I think I'm gonna give it another try. So The Girl in the Well is about this Japanese ghost who died in a very tragic, man was manipulating her physically and emotionally way back many years ago. And now the ghost is starting to follow these 2 children, a boy and a girl. I think one of them is like a teen and one of them is like a young adult. So the ghost starts following them and is kind of protecting them after they had both been kidnapped, because there's this other ghost, the woman in black, who is also following them. And the 2 children are we're kind of following the ghost, kind of following the children. and we're trying to figure out if the ghost needs to be vanquished, how they're going to vanquish the evil one and maybe not the good one, or maybe both of them, and where they came from and what their story came from. And the ghost every once in a while goes off, and there's kind of these little stories where she goes off and helps a woman or a child in a similar situation to her where they were being taken advantage, specifically by men. And it was really good and really impactful and really short. And if you have an Audible subscription, which Audible is kind of messy right now, I totally understand, but if you have one, the book is free, so I recommend picking it up. And the sequel, which I don't know how it's going to be connected because they are like standalone stories, is also free, so one day I do hope to pick that one up as well. I rated it 4 stars and it checked off another one on the list. Next, I had to read for online, was rated over 4 stars. I picked up The Rage of Dragons for the second time and DNF'd it for the second time. I keep trying to listen to the audiobook and the audiobook's just not for me. Rage of Dragons is very popular. I'm not going to be going into it right now. So to make up for that DNF, I picked up In an Absent Dream, which was a reread. It is by Shannon McGuire. It is the 5th one in her Wayward Children series, where we're following Lendy as a child as she goes to the Goblin Market and learns about fair value. It's my favorite one in the entire series. I freaking love it. I decided to reread it because I knew Across the Greengrass Fields was coming out this month, and I thought it'd be nice to reread my favorite one in the series to kind of compare the two, especially because these are both standalones within the series, and I'm really glad I did it. It was a 5-star and I still freaking enjoyed it. And then I read Across the Greengrass Field, which I also rated 5 stars, and this one we're following a girl named Reagan, and she is intersex, which I got to learn a lot about and was really glad to have the education because I had been misinformed as to what it was. And she goes into this world where it's lots of horse-like creatures, and she learns about the cruelty of mankind, the cruelty of monsters, the cruelty of all these different kinds of people. And it was also freaking good. Like I said, 5 stars. I read that one for sequel, and both of those checked off another card for me. For 5-star prediction, I read A Winter's Promise, and oh my god, I also love this. This also joined my favorites list, which like, I can't have 3 books from January. Oh, there might be more. I can't have already 3 books from January being on my favorites list, right? Winter's Promise, we are following this girl named Ophelia, and she has 2 kind of magical abilities. She can touch objects and feel the emotional connection that people had while they were touching them before her, kind of like reading them, and she can travel through mirrors. Her family marries her off to this man who lives in the North Pole, and when she gets there, neither of them want to be married. They're kind of miserable together, and his family is extremely cruel. The tundra, the landscape that she's living in is cruel. The people she meets is cruel, and she's just, oh my god, she's so strong and so powerful. She's this clumsy girl who like can't get her life together, but she can stand up for herself, and she does such a good job. The sequel to this is actually what I'm waiting for in the mail right now, so we'll get to that in a little bit, but I loved it. I rated it 5 stars, and I cannot wait to get to the next one. Really quickly though, before I move on, I just want to say, so there really isn't a romance in this book, but there is a connection between the 2 main characters. Of course, when you have that whole entire like, we're forced to get married, but we don't love each other and we don't want to be married, there's gonna grow this relationship in books of maybe we're starting to get attached to each other. And the way that grew, especially on one side of the characters versus the other, oh my god, it had me dancing. I was FaceTiming with a friend a lot while I was reading this, and I would just do like a happy dance while I was reading it. The main guy, Thorne, reminded me a little bit of Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, but with like darker vibes, and he has like this scar across his face, like across his eye, and I am here for it. I'm here for it. I love him so much. Can't wait to get to book 2 where I get to learn more about him and the awful decisions that he has made. Next, I had another buddy read, and for this I read The Grace Year, which was a surprising story. If you guys have not read this, I recommend checking it out. I ended up rating it 4 stars, but I kind of had some conflicting feelings about it during the course of the book. So this is kind of like a dystopian story. It's very reminiscent of The Handmaid's Tale. So these girls in this land have magic, and magic that they have is an aphrodisiac. So whenever they perform the magic, men around them really want to have sex with them. And when they turn 16, the girls are sent off on their grace year to this like settlement where they have to try to use up all of their magic so that when they can come back, they can be good wives and obedient and just bear children and be submissive to their husbands, basically. So right before they leave, they get claimed by a man, and then they're sent away, and if they survive, they come back and marry him. So we're following our main girl who doesn't want to get married, doesn't want to be claimed, just wants to be a farmer, and right before she leaves, her best friend, who is a male, claims her, and she's kind of upset with it. And then she goes off to the settlement for a year to try to get rid of her magic, and of course realizes that things are not as they seem. And of course there are these like rebel people who are sent to hunt the girls and try to track them down and sell their body parts for different reasons. And it was a good book. It was dark, it was creepy. Creepy's not quite the right word, but it was dark and impactful. There was this whole entire middle section that I didn't absolutely love. I kind of felt it was boring, and I go really in depth into it with the video where I talk about this book, so I'm not going to do it here. But I ended up, for the most part, really enjoying it, and I like how the ending, I like the commentary the ending had to have, because I was worried how the author was going to handle that whole entire the girl doesn't want to be a wife situation. Especially because she seemed to be forced into it no matter what she wanted. But I think she did a good job, and I'm happy I read it. 4 stars, I think I said that, and it marked another one off on the board. Next, for Animal on the Cover, I read My Contrary Mary, which is an ARC and hasn't come out yet. I listened to the audiobook, and I really enjoyed this one as well. So this is like the next group of books about women in history being told in like a satirical, magical realism kind of way. So originally they had the My Lady Janes, I think is what it's called, and now they're doing the Marys, and so this is the first one, and we are following Mary, Queen of Scots, as she is in France, and she is being married off to the Prince of France so that one day they can rule France and Scotland and hopefully England all together. So it's based on true historical things, but there is some fantasy elements within it. So there are these certain creatures, people who can turn into animals, and they are outlawed and banned. And of course, first things first, we learn that our great Queen Mary of Scots is one of them, and her people do not know, and they're trying to find ways to bring justice, and there's lots of court politics and drama and everything, and there is a romance that develops, and there was some LGBTQ relationships kind of on the side. It was a really good story. I enjoyed it way more than I thought it was going to. It's very comical, very funny. I find that I don't tend to like those, but I think this was done in a really good way, so I actually ended up really enjoying some of the funnier moments more than I thought I was going to. So I ended up rating it 4 stars, and I recommend you check this one out once it is published, especially if you liked the Jane books. I have not read them, but they are now on my list, and I can't wait to get to them. Next, I have to steal one from my buying shelf, and that is The Mask of Mirrors. I actually read this when I had it as an ARC, but I bought this book when it was 2020, so it doesn't count towards bingo or anything. But I read The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Clark, which is 2 different authors, Marie Brennan, and I always forget the second one's name. I'm so sorry. I wonder if I can find it on here. Alec Helms. Cool. So that's the other author's name. So in this, we are following a girl named Ren, and she is a con artist, and her sister decide to pull this con on this rich family where Ren, pretends to be their long lost cousin and comes in and is trying to con lots of money away from them. Her sister helps her with these cons by being like the world's greatest seamstress and sewing her all of these dresses and helping her with makeup and hair and helping her change her appearance. And she ends up being like lots of different characters throughout the book, and it's really enjoyable and really good. A romance forms. We're following lots of different POVs in this book. There is a character called Vargo, which I actually sat in on a live chat with the 2 authors, and I love him, but I didn't realize how many people who had read the book also loved him. He was just really a great character. So I have a whole entire vlog where I vlog my experience of reading this book, so I will link that somewhere and you can go check it out there because I go really in depth with it and how I feel about it. But spoiler alert, I rated it 5 stars, so this was a really good one, and I'm gonna put it back on this stack. Next, for the prompt does not contain a T, I read Red Rising. This is like a beloved sci-fi by so many people, and yet I hated it. I hated it so much. Oh my god. I really don't want to talk about this anymore, to be honest, in this video at all. So I'm just not going to. Next, for gray cover, I tried to read The Stone in the Skull by Elizabeth Bear. Didn't like it, so I DNF'd. don't really remember what it's about at this point. And then I tried to read The Cerulean, which I DNF'd. Not because I didn't like it, just because I couldn't like get into it. The intrigue wasn't there for me. So like the writing was absolutely fine and the storytelling was fine. Just couldn't get into it. And that one, you're following this girl who like people like live up in the clouds, and they decide to sacrifice her one day to save all of their people. I didn't get to the sacrificing part, but I had read like a lot of pages and I wasn't there yet, and I just wanted to be there and I wasn't, so I DNF'd. Next, for doesn't contain an A, I read a book for a secret TBR, so I will not be talking about it here, unfortunately, but I did rate it 4 stars and it was great. And then I also read for Contains M, another book for the secret TBR, which I rated 3 stars, so I forgot to actually make note of that, and I don't know where my pen is. And then finally, for my book club, we are reading a Sarah J. Maas book every single month of the year, all of 2021. I read Throne of Glass, which was a reread for me. I have previously read all of Throne of Glass, the series. This is the first time I'm rereading it. So in this book, we are following Selena Sardathian. She is an assassin who was captured, and then the prince comes to the prison, releases her to fight in this competition to become the king's champion. So basically, she would be the assassin for the king. Yeah, it's a good book. A lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it. I feel very neutral about the first few books and the last few books. Like the middle bit, I love. But like right now, we're still just kind of developing what the book is about, and we're still getting into it. And it's a lot of build-up for the later ones, to be honest. The main competition where she's like competing to be the king's champion really isn't that important, to be honest. So I will be reading Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows 100% this year. I don't know if I will continue on with the rest of them though. But the first time I read this book, I rated it 4 stars. The second time I rated it 3.5. So on Goodreads, I just rounded up. So those are all the books I read. This is what my bingo board looked like at the end of the month. I unfortunately can't show it to you in person because I had to play TBR bingo for February before I could do this video. Yeah, this is what it looked like. So looking at the board, you can see that I had 5 bingos, which means I could buy 5 books. So let's get into the books that I bought and see if I accomplished it, if everything is balanced. So first up, we already discussed Mask of Mirrors and how it didn't count because I had already, first off, previously read it and previously bought it this year. So I am only counting books that I buy if I haven't read them yet, which means technically I could borrow them from the library, read them, and then buy them if I really wanted to, but I know myself, I don't tend to do that. There's one, but it doesn't count for anything. And then I bought Gemina because it was the only one in this series in the Illuminae Chronicles that I didn't own yet. I owned book 1 and book 3 for some reason. I did own the audiobook for all 3 of them, but I'm going to be doing some buddy reads of these coming up shortly, so I wanted to have the official hardback to go with it. But since I've already previously read this, it doesn't count towards the bingos. So there's another one I don't have to worry about. Then I bought Hall of Smoke, and you can see here that I've actually already started it. So this is actually I found out, I thought it was YA, but it is an adult Viking story about this girl named Hessa who, when she screams, she can turn her enemies to dust, and her whole entire city is attacked by these other people, and it's kind of a story of vengeance and justice and revenge. So it's Viking-inspired-esque, yet the cover is beautiful. So this is the first book going towards my bingos. And then I picked up Lore by Alexandra Bracken. I have previously read her other book, which was The Darkest Minds. I never continued on with the series, but I picked this one up for a buddy read, which I will be doing in the month of February with a friend. I know that this has a lot of like Greek themes. I think there's something about like gods returning every 7 years, and if you kill them when they return to Earth, you take their place. I don't totally know. I'm trying to go into this as blind as possible, but I've heard really good things about it online, so I'm excited, and I just love when books do that. So there's 2. Next, I picked up Daughters of NRI, which is my book club's pick for February. It still has not arrived. I ordered it 15 days ago. It still has not arrived. And according to the tracking online, it might not arrive for another 12 days. I'm a little pissy. I don't know anything about this book other than it has a BIPOC author and a BIPOC 2 main characters. I think we're following twins who used to be gods but have been raised on Earth separate from each other, and they don't know that they are goddesses. Cool. I'm excited to read it and to get my hands on it and figure out what it's about. Next, I picked up where is it? Where are you? Next, I picked up the sequel and the third book to A Winter's Promise, which are The Missing of Claire de Lune and The Something of Babel. It's not the Tower of Babel, because that's from the Bible. Let's just pretend I know what we're talking about. They will be here later today, and I cannot wait to continue on with The Missing of Claire de Lune, but they are just continuing on with that series, so I already told you what that series is about. I'm not going to tell you what the sequel and the third one are about, because I don't know myself. I'm going into them blind, and I'm so excited, but they have like a yellow and a green cover, and they're beautiful. That makes 5, which means that I'm balanced. I don't owe anything. I don't have to take any kind of punishment this month. I don't have to worry about the books that I bought. I don't have anything to bring over to this month, which is kind of disappointing because I was really hoping to bring a point over, but it was cheaper for me to buy 2 and 3 of A Winter's Promise than to just buy 2. I really enjoyed this. I had a fun time this month balancing everything, and it kept me from buying a lot more books than I had wanted to, which was the whole entire point of this. I need to attack these shelves way more this coming month because I don't think I really made a dent into the books that were on my TBR coming into the month. I read a lot of books that I bought like in December, but not that I had previously bought. And there are a lot on here that I really want to read, but it's just I just don't want to get into them now. So this is my goal, to knock down a lot of these over the next coming months and to get my TBR down. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you had a fun time. I hope you've watched my 2 TBR bingo videos, because the one for February is already up, and I don't have anything to say there. Anyways, thank you for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you've read any of these books and want to talk about them, please comment down below. I'd love to talk to you about them, and if I've inspired you to read any of these books, let me know, because that makes me feel good, and I feel excited that I'm doing what I want to do, you know? You feel me? I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye!